Right, well, today we're going through the SharePoint Workflows webinar. This is an overview on workflows available to you in SharePoint and the way what we can do with workflows. Just a quick overview about myself. My name is Adriano Selmi. I'm a SharePoint consultant for Nexus. Got over 5 years with experience with SharePoint, and I'm generally involved in the whole life cycle with our clients, from pre-sales to demos, planning out the actual environments and the project specs, deploying SharePoint, whether it's on premise or getting a tenant set up in Office 365, going through the whole bespoke development of making changes to SharePoint sites, making it fit for customer needs, and then supporting SharePoint through support calls and after the fact training. So I've got my fingers pretty much in all the little different pies available to SharePoint, and I'll be trying to lend a bit of experience to you today from there. As Chris mentioned, we will have a Q&A session at the end of the day, or at the end of the workflow webinar, where you'll be able to ask and type out questions. If you feel that you want to ask something that might slip your mind, feel free to chuck it into the question chat box, and Chris will make a note of that, and we can answer that at the end. All right, workflows. So what are workflows? Workflows in SharePoint enable companies to reduce the amount of unnecessary interactions between people as they perform business processes. For example, to reach a decision, groups typically follow a series of steps. The steps can be a formal, standard operating procedure or an informal, implicitly understood way to operate. Collectively, the steps represent a business process, and that, in essence, is workflow. Now, the number of human interactions that occur in business processes can inhibit the speed and the quality of decisions. Software that simplifies and manages this human workflow enables the automation of interactions among groups who participate in the process. And this automation results in more speed, overall effectiveness of the interactions, and often reduction in human errors. So it's taking what we do normally within a business and automating it using software. In this case, we'll be going through SharePoint as the workflow platform. Now, there are two workflow engines that are available to SharePoint. The SharePoint 2010 workflow engine, which can bundle with 2010, and the SharePoint 2013 workflow experience, which is now available through 2013. Now, SharePoint 2010's workflow platform was embedded within the actual server. So when you installed SharePoint on premise, or when you applied for the Office 365 SharePoint when it was back still with the 2010 experience, you would have automatically had 2010 workflow platform available to you. With SharePoint 2013, the SharePoint 2010 workflow platform has also been carried forward to the SharePoint Server 2013. So on the screen you can see there we've got the SharePoint Server, and embedded with it is still the 2010 platform window. This means that all your workflows that you were built by using 2010 will continue to work in 2013 if you upgrade or move to 2013 from 2010. In 2010, the workflow engine installed automatically with the product, and this continues to be the case with SharePoint 2013. But if you simply install SharePoint 2013 and do not install and configure the workflow manager, then you'll have a nearly identical experience with 2010, but you won't have the 2013 version. The 2013 workflow platform only becomes available to you and your tools after you download and install the new workflow managed service and configure it to communicate with your 2013 farm. This is once again only for on-premise installations. With Office 365, the 2013 platform is automatically available out to you. Note on infrastructure, the workflow manager will require a separate server where it runs against its own SQL Server database. And this allows it to scale out. So you can actually have the single workflow server, and it works across multiple tenants. And you can also use other areas of Office products that use workflows like Word, etc. Can use the same workflow manager. So it gives you a single point to run workflows from. Now, there are a set of predefined workflows that are available out of the box. These started off in 2007, then were brought up to 2010, and now available in 2013. And they are the collect feedback workflow. Now, this workflow routes a document or an item to a group of people for feedback. The reviewers who are fed this document can provide feedback, and that is compiled and sent to the person who initiated the workflow. And by default, the collect feedback workflow is associated with the document content type and is automatically available in document libraries. You also get an approval workflow. Now, this routes a document or an item to a group of people for approval. By default, the approval workflow is also associated with document content type and available with document libraries. And a version of the approval workflow is also associated by default with a pages library on publishing sites. And this allows you to set up a process where people can create either pages in the publishing site or documents in a specific library. But before anybody else can see the document, it needs to go through an approval process where it gets signed off by reviewers. The disposition approval. Now, this manages document expiration and retention by letting users decide whether to keep or delete expired documents. The disposition approval workflow supports record management processes and is generally intended for use primarily in record center sites, but it can be used across any site. And this enables you then to set retention policies. So if you have specific documents that either need to be archived or deleted after a certain amount of time, for instance, HR policies, then this can be set up through the disposition approval workflow. And the correct users will then get an email saying, this document's expired, what do you want to do with it? There's also the collect signatures workflow. Now, this routes a document that was created in a Microsoft application to a group of people to collect their digital signatures. This is like for using Microsoft Word, where participants must complete their signature task by adding the digital signatures to the document in the relevant client program. So SharePoint will load it up and say, this needs signatures in Word. The email will be sent out to all the relevant users saying this requires your signature, and they would actually go into Word to add the signature in, and the workflow will capture that information and route that around to all the relevant users, either all at once or in a series. The three-state workflow, this is designed to track the status of a list item through 3 states. This is a hard-coded state that can only be the 3 different states, and it's used to manage business processes that require organizations to track high volume of issues or items, such as customer support issues, sales leads, and projects tasks. It's named 3-state because it tracks the status of an issue or an item through the different states and through 2 transitions between these states. For example, when a workflow is initiated on an issue in an issues list, SharePoint server creates a task for the assigned users. When the user completes the task, the workflow will change from its initial state active to its middle state resolved and creates a task for the assigned user when the user completes the task. And then the workflow can change from resolved to its final state, closed. So the 3 states there goes from active to resolved to closed, and it jumps through those different loops. The 3-state also has machine states in there so that they can jump from resolved back to active, and then from active back to resolved, and then up to closed. Translation management. This manages manual document translations by creating copies of the document to be translated and by assigning translation tasks to translators. Now, translators are generally set up as a permission group in SharePoint and requires the whole functionality to be put in place. And this workflow is only available for translation management libraries. And lastly, we have issue tracking. Issue tracking routes an issue to a team members for resolution. It presents a web page to the user who makes the entry of new issues, for example, customer complaints. As an issue progresses through different workflow states, the web page of the user changes to reflect appropriate events. So if a web page that was closed when an issue is resolved. And these are all out of the box, available without having to run SharePoint Designer or do any sort of coding behind it. There are states or parameters that allow you to customize them. So for instance, the 3 states, you can set the different states and say who it needs to be sent to, who the emails need to be sent to, etc. To get these available in your sites, it's a matter of going into the actual site collection features and activating them in there. And that will create all the libraries for it and set up all the requirements for these workflows to work. There's 2 sets of tools that are available for authoring workflows. Actually, 3. I'm not going to be covering anything through Visual Studio purely because it lends more to a developer's mindset and is used during app development and solution development, where we're focusing more on what's available to the architects and the administrators who use SharePoint from the front end. Starting off with the SharePoint Designer. Now, Designer is a free tool that you can download from Microsoft, and it interacts and connects into the back end of your SharePoint environment. 2013 can only connect to 2013 sites, so you need SharePoint Designer 2013. And if you're running SharePoint 2010, you need to download SharePoint Designer 2010. Designer is mainly used for workflows and for design sites and so forth, but we'll look at what's available to you on the workflow side. Now, when you create a new workflow, it gives you the option to choose your experience. At the bottom, you can see the platform type will be either 2010 workflow or 2013 workflow. If you're on-prem and you don't have the 2013 workflow server installed, the 2013 workflow option there will be grayed out. If you're working through Office 365 and SharePoint Online, both those options will be available to you out of the box. So there's no setup required there. I will kick off with 2010. 2010 pretty much works on steps, conditions, and actions. These steps are logical holding boxes. This is where you place all the different conditions and actions in them, and you can actually create new steps and rename them accordingly to give you a more logical setup and makes it easier for you to read through the workflow and to separate different areas. For instance, in the screen over here, I've set it so that the first step will be setting all the variables, such as who the manager is, who needs to be emailed, and then the second step will be to send the emails. Conditions allow you to set certain rules in the workflow. There are 2 common ones at the top of common conditions are set there. They are pretty much 9 times out of 10 the ones you're going to be using. If any value equals a value, that's any value for any list or library within the same site, or if current item field equal value. So if you've got a list or a document that you've pulled up and you say if it's a specific type of document, or if there is a column in there that's set to a specific flag or value, you can say if that value equals this, then do the following. The other conditions are just set helpful ones, so you can check if it was created by a specific person, or if it's modified by that person, if the person's a valid SharePoint user, file size type. So it gives you a couple of different conditions that you can run through before actually doing any of the actions in workflow. Now, the actions are set into different groups. The first group are your core actions, and these do just basic functions in there, like adding comments, doing calculations, pausing for duration or for until time, sending an email. Most of the actions are pretty self-explanatory from the naming. The nice thing is these are all available just from a drop-down menu. And I'll give you a quick run through on SharePoint Designer in a bit to show you how you just add these onto it. Document set actions. Now these are specifically for document sets. That's when you enable document sets within a library. We have list actions. This allows you to control different list actions. Now these are available. You can, with the workflow, it doesn't need to run against just itself. You can run these items against other lists itself. So if it says set field and current item, that's for the current item, but you can delete or create list items in other lists in the workflow. Relational actions. This was quite nice. It's just a single one for looking up a manager of a user. And this is helpful in approvals. So if you want to create an approval process for the whole company, not just for specific departments, you can set part of the action in there is to look up who the user's manager is. And SharePoint does this through the AD sync, where you can set who a user's manager is. And then we have task actions. These are quite nice. This integrates with Outlook, so it'll be a task in Outlook that'll be sent to a user. There's also a task list that gets created in SharePoint, which mirrors the task information. So when a task is created, like a to-do item or an approval process, or these custom tasks, these get sent to a user's Outlook or Exchange, and they can open it up in Outlook. They can fill in all the details on the form there and click on save, and then that'll pull the information into SharePoint itself. And then lastly are utility actions, and this is allowing you to do a bit more with fields. So if you have a string that you need to actually look around a bit more, find a bit more information in, and do work with that, the utility actions will allow you to do that. Now with SharePoint 2013 workflow experience, the steps have changed quite drastically. But they're still called steps, but when they drop onto the page, they become stages. Now, the stages allow you to allow a second thing, which is transition to stage. So instead of creating steps just to create yourself logical boundaries, now you can create steps to have actual processes that you can jump to. So just for instance, over here, we've got stage 1 and stage 2, and we can run information in stage 1, and then when it goes to the transition point, we can say, if a variable has met a certain aspect, then it can go on to stage 2. If it doesn't, it goes back to stage 1 and reruns the process. Now, if you've got multiple stages, you can point it at any stage within the workflow. And the final one will always be on stage 2. You can see it says transition stages go to end of workflow, and that just ends the workflow over here. So this gives you the ability to jump around between different stages in your workflow, which is sorely lacking from the 2010 experience, which was very much a linear experience. The only ability in the 2010 is the 3-state, which limits you then to those 3 different states. Loops have also been included. Now these are quite nice. So these can be added within the stages where you can run through a loop action. There are 2 types of loops. The first is just one that'll run a certain amount of times. So you can say, run this loop 1 time, 2 times, 3 times. You can also set that variable to say it'll run a certain amount of times. The second one, it'll run repeatedly while value equals value. So you can actually increment a value within the loop itself and run it that way. So it becomes very similar to a coded loop. Also very much missed from the 2010 experience. This allows for a lot better calculation workflows in SharePoint and updating of other lists and so in there. Conditions have also been changed slightly. They've removed the if a value in this list. It's now just if any value equals value. And the other conditions, they've added in things like person is a valid SharePoint user or title field contains keywords. These become a lot more helpful in the new experience. There's also been new actions added to the workflow experience, something called coordination actions. This allows you to start off a list workflow, site workflow. At the moment, it's only a 2010 workflow that you can kick off, but it does allow for management. So you can create smaller bunched workflows that are very specific, that have very specific tasks, and have them sit in the background waiting for the 2013 workflow just to kick it off during a specific stage. Core actions, there's a new dictionary type. So you'll be able to build a dictionary and then count items from the dictionary or get items from a dictionary. We can also call HTTP web services, and the logs of the history list actually is originally the same one. It's available in 2010. But these core actions are quite nice. It starts bringing in a lot more functionality into your workflows and making them a lot more elastic. In the list actions, there's 2 new ones that have been added in there. So you can translate a document now if you've got the machine translation available. You can set this in action. You can also wait for an event in a list item. So you can start using events as opposed to just a change or a create event that to start a list. You can actually wait for these events now. Task actions have been changed. We can assign a task or start a task process. In 2010, there were very specific tasks that you can create, where with 2013 now, it's a full task experience. So anything that can be done in a normal task in Outlook can now be brought in through the workflows. Utility actions have also been updated, where you can find a substring within a string. You can also replace substrings in the string, and you can trim the strings. So this helps you to work with data that's been added in and actually manipulate that data a lot more easily. Finally, the second way of creating workflows is through Microsoft Visio. In Visio, we now have stencil shapes that allow you to emulate a workflow. So if you don't want to write it down as it goes through in SharePoint, you can actually visualize it in Microsoft Visio using stages and similar, all the different shapes that would emulate the different workflow conditions and actions, including the loops and any of the functionality I've shown you above. That's all available there. So you can create the whole Visio stencil shape over there, map out the workflow as you would normally, but instead of then rewriting in SharePoint, you can actually just, in the workflow section, import it from Visio and add it into your workflow collection. I'll quickly give you guys a demonstration of the workflows in action, just to give you an idea of how easy it is to run workflows. So like I said, we've got the 2013 and the 2010. What I'll do is I'll give you a quick view of the 2013 workflow. So in our stages over here, we can add in conditions, and it's just a click and point, and we can choose from our current item any sort of conditions that we have in there. Let's see, let's get an idea. So if, let's see, current item created by and you can choose, so if we add another line in there, just going to use this for the time being. So if the created by is the same as the modified, then we can actually send a person an email saying you've modified your own document, just as an example over here. Stages can be quickly added in. Actions, just point and click. It's extremely easy to create and run the workflows in SharePoint Designer. The whole process is very much a point-and-click process, and it's just a case of learning what it can be done and working through it from there.